Welcome to the podcast where we take something old, a Doctor Who story from the original series, compare it with something new, one from the new series, and add something borrowed, though there's no sketch this time, to make Something Who. Hello, I'm Richard, and we're back with Something Who podcast episode 111, where this time we're looking at two stories with double trouble. Initially, we'll look at Fifth Doctor adventure The Caves of Androzani from season 21, and later we'll examine 11th Doctor outing The Rebel Flesh and the Almost People from Series 6. And with me to decide whether these stories have double the fun or just provoke a double take, we have a fine facsimile of a panel, starting with writer, board treader, and I've run out of steam there. I'll try again.
Do you feel the need for us all to have three distinct strings to our bow?
Yeah. Yes.
You're
it's
already
Paul.
overselling me.
Hello, Paul.
Yes, I'm Paul. Hello.
Good evening.
Writer, board treader, and professional rose pruner.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and then next we've got science and astronomy writer Giles.
Hello. Schlapper Royale and noted amateur person. Yes, yeah. No, the real Giles couldn't make it, so I've come in his place.
Excellent. And finally, we got Lego enthusiast and just back from displaying his creations across the northern provinces. It's Rick.
Well, good evening.
Hooray.
So yeah, I guess that's a good place to start, Rick. If you could, you've been displaying your Lego in a couple of places. One that I didn't get around to releasing the podcast in time to promote, and the other that I did. So how did it all go?
Fantastic. In all, over the 3 days in Mythenroyd and then in Manchester, pretty much 11,000 people through the door.
Wow.
Past my sets, offering a wild array of unsolicited views on my Lego creations and Doctor Who in general. I had a Betamax display this time round, and probably the best thing was how many people were going to get the reference of Quatermass and the Pit. And they turned out to be the best conversations. So I shall be displaying that set a bit more in the future.
Bro. So it's coming back, Doctor Who, on the 12th of April, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I did see something about that. Get good.
Not long to wait, 6 weeks, something like that. Well, I mean, it'll probably be about 3 weeks by the time I get this out.
That's true.
Yeah. We sound very excited.
Yeah, we're in the midst of some rumouring about season 2, but nevertheless, I'm excited for some fresh Doctor Who on the telly.
I seem to have managed to miss any rumours.
Well, I think what we're convinced is it's going to be a long break after this, so I guess we should enjoy it while it's with us.
Oh, I suppose there is that, yes. Yeah.
Wonderfully positive attitude. Yeah, I'll go with that. I'll enjoy these 8 as if they were all we were going to get until next decade.
All the more room for revisiting old Doctor Who.
Yeah. So the other thing that I did in doing some AI research recently, I decided to ask Microsoft's Copilot all about Something Who to see what it knew about it. And it started out really quite impressively by telling me all about the podcast and who's on it. And then it just went off into a flight of fancy. It started telling me all about episodes that didn't exist. I mean, it picked pairs of stories that were entirely plausible mixes. And the way it described the episodes, I could believe that we might have done it that way. I just know that we hadn't. So yes, the hallucinations are
I mean, so far, so standard AI, but was there any level on which you thought that these invented podcasts sounded better than the real thing? Because perhaps we should step back before AI culls us and doesn't give us the choice, and let it. It's got the voice synthesis. Perhaps it could make us sound less like Guardian readers with speech impediments. The whole thing could be better. Better story pairings.
Yeah. I think it was a little bit unimaginative, and I think it was pairing the Daleks with Dalek.
Yeah, that's kind of how we started, wasn't it? All those years ago. I think we raised the bar a bit since then.
Yeah,
you could give it a list of our remaining stories
Yeah.
and get co-pilot to pick the next episode.
What I did do was ask Copilot what it made of links between the Caves of Androzani and the Rebel Flesh. I'll be trying some of those out on you later on to see what you think.
Yes.
I bet it won't come up with the one I've got.
Very good.
Suddenly occurred to me that I think I may have got the most obscure link
Oh,
you ever had.
Oh.
So there's something to tease you with. Keep you listening to the end.
Well, Giles, it's going to keep me listening till the end.
yeah. I haven't really got any options, but unless you could give me a little warning as when you get back to say it, and I'll clear off.
Yeah.
So, are we ready to dive into the first story then, the Caves of Androzani?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Let's dive in head first in the deep end.
So, Caves of Androzani, written by Robert Holmes and directed by Graham Harper. And I am going to shatter some illusions now because I didn't watch Caves of Androzani on its original broadcast, at least not all of it. But then I've watched it many, many times since. So I watched episode 1 back in 1984, and I immediately thought, oh, this is something special. But it wasn't so special that I remembered to watch episode 2 the following night. I was watching a Norman Wisdom film with my family on BBC Two.
Oh my God.
And
Okay.
and so I completely failed to set the video recorder, everything. So for
You
many,
weren't even at Boy Scouts or something.
no. So for many years, I had episodes 1, 3, and 4 on VHS, and that's how I watched a story. I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 times in the 80s. It wasn't repeated until 1993 on BBC Two. So that's, I guess, when I first saw episode 2.
Wow.
So yeah, it's considering, I guess, that it was a sort of formative story for me. It's quite a strange way to have viewed it.
I had an extremely similar experience with the next one, the Twin Dilemma. I missed episode 2 or more probably 3 because it wasn't the Cub Scouts, but it was something like that.
Right.
But all I can tell you is that was easier to live with.
Yeah.
So you never found out how they got out of Death Under the Red Cloth until
No.
years later.
Did you come up with any theories, or were you not that bothered?
Well, I mean, I guess by the time that it came to episode 3, it was evident that there were android duplicates. So, I mean, I guess I knew roughly how it had happened. And spoilers, but then you can sort of see in episode 1 that there's a door opening unexpectedly, which I didn't notice the first time round. But yes, I kind of worked it out.
Well, I definitely watched it all at the time. And strangely, I don't think I've ever watched it on its own since. I've watched it in runs of that season, but this definitely first time I just thought, well, what's Caves of Androzani on its own? And probably left me thinking slightly differently about it. But no doubt we shall discuss.
Yeah, I don't have any terribly interesting stories to say about my first experience of this one, other than I watched it on transmission. Was riveted to it. I have revisited it on its own, definitely. And God, I'm not going to do a rewatch of season 21, am I?
So,
it's got its I pick out a few, but yeah.
Oh. I think I actually made a note of I think I ranked all the stories of that season in a book somewhere. I could go and have a look at half time. But my memory is that it was my second favourite that year after Resurrection of the Daleks.
Oh,
well,
right.
I was I wasn't an intellectual at that age, obviously. No. Before much longer, my brain finished forming. And
then you knew that Frontios was the best thing in the season.
That was third favourite at the time, I think, even then.
Yeah,
because I liked the funny, slightly off-centre ones. I have to admit, I'm sure I watched it loads of times over the last 40 years. I didn't watch it for this, partly because I was a bit pressed for time, but also I saw it at the Riverside Studios last year.
Oh, right.
In the company of Peter Davison. I mean, he was about 15 feet away. I don't mean he was next to me.
Right. Okay.
Very exciting day. Peter Davison. Who was he with? Anyway, one of the guest stars from Androzani was supposed to turn up and had to cancel at short notice, and they replaced him with Adric. I think I've said that before on here, haven't I? I don't know how I crowbarred it in.
No, it
But
doesn't.
yeah, Adric does have that one very important line that puts the whole story in context.
Yes.
So it's fair enough for him to be that. More recently, I've seen one of those YouTube reactors react to it. If you don't know what that is, ask your grandchildren. But
if you don't know what that is, be grateful.
yeah, well, I mean, some of them are. Well,
Don't look it up. Don't look it up on the internet. Don't find out.
Of course, it's a massive waste of time watching other people watching television. But I found one or two of them interesting and worth watching the program through their eyes to see. Well, basically to get some new opinions because they're short. They're short on the ground. New opinions.
So, incidentally, did Davison actually watch the Caves of Androzani with you?
Oh, I think he did. I mean, he was near the back of the room, but I'm fairly sure he didn't nick off.
Well, because during the Five Doctors, when he was sitting about 4 seats away from me, he jiggered off as soon as the thing came off, and yeah, that was the end of him for about an hour and a half.
I'll find out. I'll ask a friend.
Yeah.
In the interval.
I mean, look, I'm not accusing him of anything. He's perfectly. It didn't spoil my enjoyment of the Five Doctors 2024 edition or 2023 edition. But yes, it was just interesting. I suppose he felt like he'd lived through it and he didn't need to see it again.
Yeah,
the bar was open at the BFI, wasn't it? Maybe it wasn't. I don't think it was at Riverside, so that will be the.
He was there for the duration when they did the screening of the JNT documentary, but that's admittedly a different thing. I was trying to remember what it was that I clocked him in the audience as.
I mean, look, when you get to your 70s, I imagine every hour is precious, and maybe he concluded that wasn't how he wanted to spend that particular one, which was fair enough.
Philosophical, slightly morbid. Undeniably true. A lesson that we could all learn from. We don't have to wait till we get to that age. I feel like that every day. Doesn't help.
Dear. Right. Richard, you can strike Underworld off the list of episodes we're ever reviewing.
We'll just have to have different contributors.
Sorry, I was just going for an obvious target there. I think Underworld's probably got a lot more to recommend it than them.
That wasn't because you remember that it's the only story I haven't seen since the only remaining story I haven't seen since broadcast.
Oh wow!
I'm saving it to do for this.
Right.
Okay, we'll have to. No, I was just making
once I realised it was the only one
an obvious
left.
Joke about and trying to think of it would have been the Twin Dilemma, except we've already done that.
Yes.
So.
You can save it till last, like as if you're running the DVD range or something. Because partly because they always save the dodgy ones till last, and partly because there's this rumor that they saved Terror of the Zargons till last to annoy Ian Levine. I don't believe that rumor, but it's save Underworld to annoy me.
Yeah. So Caves. The thing that strikes me about it straight away is it's full of energy and interest. I mean, even the opening dialogue. I mean, it's kind of nonsensical, but there's a nice relationship between Perry and the Doctor. The actors have picked up on that. They seem to be enjoying themselves. You've got the Doctor making deductions. I mean, you might say that they're sort of Holmesian deductions, particularly, I guess, given the identity of the scriptwriter. And I feel like for that whole first episode, it doesn't really let up, and it sort of draws you into to the story very nicely. And perhaps that's because old Bob hadn't written one for a while, and he was sort of enthusiastic to be doing it again. I don't know.
Is this his first one since Kroll?
I believe so.
Because people often point out the similarities between
don't they?
Between this and Kroll.
Well, maybe he'd been mulling on it for the last 5 years, thinking, I want to do that one again, but do it properly. I don't think he had.
No.
But I really need to sit down one day and... Because people, skeptics, or idiots, depending on which way you look at it, say that it is just Power of Kroll. It's nothing. The sort of people who say there's nothing special about Androzani. I think even Eric Saywood said that, didn't he? He said he was probably jealous, but he professed not to quite understand why people thought it was so special. And so it was just like any other Holmes script. But is it different? Is it special? Or is it just Graham Harper, which is what the skeptics say? Does it just look nicer? So if Graham Harper directed Power of Kroll, would we all be thinking that was a Stone Cold classic? No, that's. I'm going to answer it now in case we don't circle back.
Well, there's no escaping that we're watching the Doctor Who magazine #1 story.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been very sceptical of that accolade for this story. Not that I didn't think it was a decent story, but all my previous rewatches and my view of it at the time of broadcast wasn't that it was anything special, to answer Paul's question.
Mm-hmm.
But watching it as a standalone this time was comfortably the most I've enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps I tarnish it a bit with that run of stories in the season. And I don't think it is just down to the direction. There's clever direction in it, that's for sure. But the world building is great.
Mm-hmm.
The characters are great. I really like the acting.
Yeah.
And it strikes a decent balance between the Eric Soward kind of automatic gunfire at every opportunity type approach to Doctor Who and some of those really kind of classic Doctor Who themes. I think it's far more than the direction. I think we can give it credit for ticking boxes in most respects for the story.
I do think it's got one big piece of leverage that only a handful of stories have, which is that it's a regeneration story, and therefore you can go all guns blazing for this doom-laden atmosphere and actually pull it off because you know what you're building to the Doctor's death, and okay, there will be some kind of satisfactory resolution, but it doesn't have to end with a happy. And I guess they, and season 21 is, the Sayward era in general, are fairly infamous for doing that sort of thing with Warriors of the Deep, and arguably I can't quite. It's so long since I've seen Resurrection, I'm not quite sure where that ends up. But obviously, I guess there is that, and then this comes in the middle of it. But it is, I think it takes full advantage of the fact he can go that extra mile.
What precisely were you saying that Resurrection might have in common with Warriors of the Deep?
No, I'm trying to remember.
Everyone dies, right?
Yeah,
everyone dies,
and they pretty much do here. So but they make a point of that. Warriors of the Deep and Resurrection. The first one most explicitly. There should have all this. Oh, there should have been another way. They just and my Aunt Vanessa told me when it stops being fun, give it up. Too many good people have died today, Doctor.
Of course,
Whereas
that's
here,
how it ends.
and there's nothing.
Forgotten that.
I like. Well, anyway, I quite like the way that ending's written. It's better than Warriors of the Deep. But here, nobody has to make that explicit. And of course, it has the extra cherry on the cake that one person survives, which puts the whole thing in a different perspective if you want to review it from that angle. It's so much more interesting, and I think that's true of the story all over. Where it reminds us of things that have been done before, it just does it better in a more polished way, in a more seamless way. No fat, no fluff, no unnecessary subplots, no bits that characters that don't seem to need to be there. Nothing that doesn't quite work. That's what? No, there isn't. If you thought there was, then you imagined it.
Okay. Okay. That must have been an hallucination. It's okay, right.
What? Magma Beast?
Armadillo.
I remember some weird argument in DWB once between a fan of Talons of Weng Chiang and a fan of Caves of Androzani, saying with a straight face, well, at least this one, it was whichever way round it was, they were saying, well, at least my one doesn't have a stupid monster that ruins the whole thing. And could he...
I went and saw Harry Hill last Friday, and, which, I have to say that I like the giant rat in Talons of Weng Chiang, but I also like the Magma Beast in Caves of Androzani. So, which is best? There's only one way to find out.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talk about the, like Paul makes the observation, it's not a subplot, but almost the story of the Doctor and Perry is completely separate from
Yeah.
absolutely everything else. And
Mm.
that's one of the things that I like, the playfulness of that, which is to set off on that track that this is fundamentally about the Doctor and Perry having a mishap
Mm.
with the egg in the cave, and all the actions are purely about finding the cure and getting Perry out of the situation the Doctor feels that he's put her in.
Mm.
And yet all this absolute carnage and mayhem and chaos and
Mm.
to a certain extent violent fun takes place all around this.
Mm.
And yet doggedly the story of Doctor and Perry continues on,
Mm.
irrespective of what's going on around. And I find that just
Hmm.
a
It's-
really fun aspect of the story.
Yeah, it's clever. It's clever because in some ways, yes, they're tangential. They've got their own story going on that is divorced from all of this stuff. And in some ways, you could say, okay, if they'd never been there, probably some of this stuff would have played out similarly anyway. But on the other hand, the fact they're there and they get mistaken for the gun runners, and that leads to a whole load of things like, and that draws Morgus into. I can't quite work out the mechanics, but I think you could probably say it's because of them that Morgus ultimately gets his comeuppance.
Yeah.
Because if they hadn't happened to show up, then the whole chain of events that leads to Morgus meeting Jack probably wouldn't have come.
I think the
about.
difference is that it's not that they don't have any influence on the story, which is the Indiana Jones thing, where allegedly Raid for the Lost Ark would play out exactly the same, literally the same if he didn't turn up. I don't know, is that true? Has anyone checked? But here, it's more that they don't. Yeah, I mean, if it was a farce, there'd be the characters blundering through this, causing other, tripping people up and not noticing the chaos they're causing. And of course, tragedy is the flip side of farce. I mean, it's, as you say, what is unusual about this is that they just want to survive and get out. And they're not there to save the day and do good because, to a certain extent, there is no good side. They're just it's just a squabble between bad people. So I would love to know if Holmes came up with this, because that's very unusual for him. I mean, most of his stories followed a fairly traditional structure, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder where he came up with this. Was it, as you said, you can do something a bit different because it's a regeneration story that gives you license to have a different atmosphere. But it goes further than just the funereal atmosphere, doesn't it? It's the whole structure. And then it also ties into the what's become the theme of the Fifth Doctor, his that he could never quite do enough. He suffers as many losses as wins, and he doesn't want one more anymore. And in which sense the cameo of Adric at the end is not gratuitous. It does sort of tie into his attitude and the whole of the story. Now, that's not the sort of thing that Holmes would have thought up, would it? But is Saywood subtle enough to have thought of that? It's just something seemed to be in the air. I'd like to know how we got there with the discussions between the two of them. Did Holmes try harder? Was Kroll no good because he was worn out after being on the program for so long? And was this better because he had a rest? Or is that just too fanciful? It's not. I mean, he was a jobbing writer. He wasn't thinking, "Well, I better make this one count. I've been away for a while. I better make this something special." It's, of course, nobody thinks like that.
And yet, Paul, to your point, if we thought of the perfect heroic end for the Fifth Doctor, who is unassuming, quite passive at times, focused on perhaps too much at times on the individual, it's almost perfect to the character. This, the nose. He doesn't save the universe or fight the warrior hordes, die the brave warrior death, have some grand scheme in hand. It is just simply about, messed up here. I owe it to an individual. I'm going to save them. Perfect. And like you say, whether that's the script editor or the writer, somewhere between the two of them, they've picked the perfect end.
I mean, isn't it interesting? I mean, considering the season we're looking at later on, that you got Stephen Moffat having the Doctor and Rory blowing up, hundreds of Cybermen to try and get on top of the situation with Amy, and in fact, all that the Doctor does is milk a queen bat to save Perry. But I mean, the drama works so much better because the stakes are still high, without having to have all this sort of supposed huge scale in play.
Yeah,
it's like a refinement of, because previously, well, it sets the standard for making the way that a Doctor goes out fit their character, let alone incorporate themes from the whole of their era. Nobody really thought about that in the early days, and to a certain extent, maybe the Third Doctor with his
Gonna say Planet of the Spiders.
with his confronting, which is entirely because the producer had a philosophical bent, and then Tom Baker. Well, I guess Bidmead has his cake and eats it. He saved, the Fourth Doctor saves the universe because he has to do something big because he's been there 7 years and he's Tom Baker, but also it's very mundane because he just falls. He just falls 50 feet.
After putting out a Scott socket.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah. So that feels like a trial run at this, really. They're hedging your bets, I think, with the Fourth Doctor, but here it's full on. This is the only way this could have gone. And it sums him up and not redeems him, but allows him to look back on some of his earlier failures with.
The other thing that really impresses me about this story is that he does that to save the life of a character that, in many ways, we don't really know. We haven't got used to. We're less inclined to be worried about than, say, had Tegan or Nyssa survived through to that final episode and been the character in peril. And I think the script, the directing and the performance of Nicola Bryant do a really good job of making you feel like this is a really epically important person to the Doctor at that point in time. Now, I'm sure that our view of the Doctor is that every life is important, but I feel like it's slightly against them in terms of the churn of companions, and yet they do a really good job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a real shame in a way because it feels like there's a real spark between Peter Davison and Nicola Bryant in this story, that we just get that one and then it's over and done with. And then the character seems, mishandled in the early Baker era thereafter. So, yeah, but this is, it's nice all the way through that, the dialogue where they're trying to remember that they have to address Shellac as Sir, it's a lovely bit of comedy.
Yes, yeah.
And there's loads of more examples of that.
So outside of the Doctor's story, abject chaos, and it's wonderfully chaotic. And again, I think this is a script, not a director credit, that those weave together in a very natural way. There doesn't seem to be any of the bringing together of those various plot streams that feels too forced. Even Morgus going to Androzani Minor doesn't feel forced. The constant double crossing doesn't feel that contrived. It's an easy watch in that respect because you can kind of see how all these unsympathetic characters are twisting themselves into their own awful fates.
In this era, there's a number of sort of army characters, sort of, brigadier-ish. There's the guy in Earthshock. There's the fellow in Resurrection of the Daleks, and they're all kind of quite sympathetic characters. And then you get Shellac in this, and you sort of feel momentarily as if he's a decent sort of character. But then it turns out he's quite happy to send somebody to the front to get shot to cover over his embarrassment having killed androids and so on. He's not, after all, a sympathetic character, and he can't really be bothered to save the Doctor, even though he's pretty sure that he's innocent. So yeah, I guess that tells you that we're in a different kind of story.
I've seen the skeptics say that Shellac is the clue that this isn't a wonderful even-toned symphony of perfection that it is, because Chelluck is written like a comedy character, a buffoonish, blimpish sergeant major, and that's what Holmes wrote, and that's what he would have been expecting in any other era. And it's only Graham Harper that saves the day by playing him straight. But it's not true. But I mean, it's not. You could argue the opposite. That Holmes always wrote his characters to be three-dimensional, and it was earlier directors who let him down by going for obvious comic relief wherever they saw a possibility.
Sure.
But it's just, it's just little moments, and some of his expressions, turns of phrase are,
Very.
a bit brigadierish, as you said. Stiff upper lip. But I think they're just a bit of seasoning. I don't think the character is a joke.
Go on, Giles.
Has slightly different opinion on that, which is that I kind of found Chelluck to be, watching this time, with maybe a more skeptical eye, or analytical eye. I kind of felt like he felt like the weakest link to me, and I thought, there's a lot of comedy in the script that is being missed by a somewhat flat performance. And the weird thing was, I thought, who should be playing this part? The actor Michael Cochran, famous for, Red vs. Fane Cooper.
Yeah.
He played a fairly blimpish officer in Sharp in several episodes, and several things like that. And lo and behold, then along come the credits, and what's the name? What's his name?
Is it
Martin
Cochran?
Yes, and he is indeed Michael Cochran's brother. So
Martin Cochran's subtler
possibly
brother.
subtler / flatter. Yeah.
What a great... we could spend hours
I do wonder,
discussing that, couldn't we?
Is there somewhere in the multiverse a version of this?
I can't imagine. I love Michael Cochran. I can't imagine a version of this where he's playing that character, because it would just... If that is entirely Graham Harper's decision to flatten out the tone of the characters so that they're all just the right level of larger than life, rather than any actual grotesques or grandiose comic turns appearing, then well done to him. But I think it's possible that I don't think there is humour in his dialogue, but I don't think he's going for any actual laugh out loud jokes. So any actor trying to reach for a laugh from that character would have been going too far, I think. And it is really, for me, this story, and I'm not saying Doctor Who should be like this every week. I love the variety, but I think the production on this shows how it's so in sympathy with the script that for me it just shows what's been lacking in almost every other story beforehand. It kind of ruins Doctor Who for me. No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. But when the clarity of sight of the director and then his luck in actually finding the right people to embody the characters as he sees them, it just seems what.
Yes, in any other story,
that's what we should be aiming for every time.
Yeah, in any other story in that season, you could have those same characters with their lines delivered over the top. The capacity is absolutely there for every character in the story, and none of them, whether that's on a tight rein or otherwise, are allowed to stray from that, and it's so good for it.
So that we're back there to, is the script anything special, or is it entirely because the sets are better than usual, the lighting's better than usual, the camera works better than usual, the cast is more consistent?
Well, I mean, I've heard people say that a modern viewer watching Caves of Androzani side by side with Twin Dilemma doesn't really spot much difference between them in terms of... I know,
it's tragic, isn't it?
I mean,
really?
In terms of production values. Well, I mean, if that is the case, which I struggle to believe, I still feel like, there's still a world of difference between them because this is an intelligent script, and I can't find much of that in evidence in the Twin Dilemma, for instance.
Yeah.
It's a generalism, but it's predicated on the fact that we aren't just not in tune with Doctor Who, but with depending on their age, probably not in tune with the production values of TV of this era. It all looks cheap to them. We think we can see what they've done. We know how badly things can go wrong. We can see how how they've made miracles with the same budget essentially the same budget. Okay, they clearly Twin Dilemma had run out of money. Otherwise, this story would be full of tinsel as well. It's not all artists.
Yeah.
But yes, they. I mean, when I started introducing the future Mrs. Morris as she was then to Doctor Who decades ago, I made the traditional fan mistake of starting with the really good ones, and this was one of the first that I showed her, and she just laughed and or complained about the music all the way through. And I've got this wonderful haunting music, and I thought, God, if you don't like this, what are we? And of course, I think after a few years, she got Stockholm syndrome and started to stop complaining and started to understand. But I'm still not sure she ever really got her head around the idea that which is a good one, which is a bad one. What are you saying, dear? Oh, right, okay. You can have her on a future episode to state her side.
Well, having talked about the lightning in a bottle and then me indulging in a little bit of fantasy casting or alternate casting for Shellac, it's bizarre that this of all the stories, this one has got a rose gallery of alternate universes of real alternate casting that almost happens. And we had Jack being offered to, I believe Oliver Tobias and Tim Curry were both offered the part. And was Christopher Gable in the frame for Salatine at one point?
Not sure.
Or he was in the frame for someone.
What happened to David Bowie and Mick Jagger? Am I getting confused?
David Bowie and Mick Jagger were both, I'm not sure whether that was just
on the long list.
Fantasy casting on the long list. I'm not sure they know that they were offered them. Yeah, I'm not sure about. I'm sure there's certainly about Christopher Gable being offered one of the other parts and then ending up as Jack.
Right, okay.
Roger Daltrey was apparently also considered for Salatine.
He had to be a musician.
They literally, they seem to have done that. And Ian Holm was approached for Morgus.
All right.
Which would have been an interesting.
And at the other end of the scale, Ben the Sailor could have been Shellac.
Oh, good Lord, yes, yeah.
And indeed was supposed to be his top choice, and Jane T vetoed it.
Or was he Kelper?
Because people would... Was it? I thought anyway, whatever.
No, I don't know. It could be wrong.
Jane T thought that you couldn't reuse old companion actors because everyone would notice, even though it was A, 25 years ago, and B, he'd already done that.
Yeah, hello, Meglos.
But whatever. Look, all these putative castings horrify me because some of them are bad and some of them... It just seems like even if we got the second or third or fourth choice for half the characters, they sound better to me, so I'm not quite sure. I think it's always like that advice to writers to always cut the first paragraph or the first sentence from any chapter. You should cross off the first two or three ideas you have for casting and start a bit lower down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because...
it feels like every cloud has a strontium lining.
Well, indeed, it's very hard to... Yeah, Ian Holmes... one that you could see having got something great out of it, but it's also hard to see him being much better than John Normington is.
I don't mean that they would all have been fantastic, shit, but they would all have been either not as good in technical acting terms or just overcast. I mean, distracting. I do prefer seeing people that I don't know. I'm not one of those people who claim that they can never identify with the character if they know that the human being that the face belongs to. I think that's a bit too far the other way, but there's great pleasure in seeing something brand new.
Yeah, I can't quite see Tim Curry.
How many things have you seen Ian Normington in? I've seen him in a few period pieces. I can't remember now whether he's always he's quite distinctive, isn't he? That is a lot of that is him. Although he doesn't always look straight into the camera. You'd think that somebody would have pointed it out by now if that was his gimmick.
Well, that was apparently a mistake, or he sort of misread it. I read somewhere he'd misread a direction in the script or something.
I believe the first time, and then Graham Harper said that was good. Let's go with it.
Yeah.
Effectively.
But of course, it makes when you just take that anecdote. We've all grown up with that anecdote, a happy accident. But it's not like a happy accident. Like, I don't know, he tripped or something. And the director thought, that looked good. Keep that in. I mean, he looked at the camera because he was soliloquizing. So as an actor, he thought it made sense. So it's there's some reason to his method to his madness.
Yeah, bonkersly works, doesn't it? I mean, it's just...
Well, it makes it more Shakespearean, which it already is. I mean, maybe we don't need to make that explicit, but it's good.
I mean, there's odd things, like the face-to-face thing in the lift between him and Timmin. There's all sorts of things that Morgus does that's bizarrely quirky, both in terms of the world he's inhabiting and the fact that he's doing it on a TV program.
Yeah,
and he gets away with it every time.
Now he gets most of the richest Holmesian dialogue, doesn't he? Or the great insults that are often given to the main villain. I mean, Jack is the Phantom of the Opera character, which Holmes has done several times before, including in quick succession in The Deadly Assassin and Weng Chiang. But in Weng Chiang, Greel is the one who gets all the... hang on, they both do, don't they? They both do. Jack and Morgus both get very ripely overwritten insults to hurl at each other. But the way that Norrington underplays them all is delightful. I mean, really, they're so... and they're literally flat. Never mind Martin Cochrane's apparently underwhelming acting. He's choosing a register that makes you have to concentrate on what he's saying, and then somehow they hit even harder than if he was going full ham.
You used the phrase "the main villain." I think Morgus is the main villain, isn't he?
What did I say? Did I imply that Jack was?
Jack was the Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
Could be perceived as a sympathetic villain, but Morgus is the real.
He is
epitome.
But the fact that it's split and that you can debate it is again part of what's unique about this. I think. I mean, it does feel like Holmes has taken. It's not like he's learned from anything he's done wrong before, but he had previously generally not fallen into the trap, but just stuck with the structure of having an actual moustache-twirling villain at the top of the pile, a final boss, as the kids say nowadays. And the fact that he knows he can do without one here, I mean, he wouldn't have had a monster in it if J&T hadn't forced him to, apparently. So then it would have looked even less like a typical... It would have broken even more rules.
Yeah, it would have looked more like the space pirates, because they just would have been people, traveling through space in spaceships with funny accents.
So if you've got a Phantom of the Opera style villain,
yes,
we have the evil conglomerate villain, who's arguably the real villain of the piece.
Yeah.
We also have the anti-hero villain in Stotts, who I also find entirely watchable.
Yeah.
Plows a really good furrow for himself, playing it mostly people quite successfully off against each other. But even that's not enough to survive.
It's interesting with Stotts that he's very sort of self-confident, but there's a point quite early in the story where Jack indicates that he'll give the gun runners a bit of Spectrox to make sure they'll come back again with some more guns. And he says, well, I'll give him half. And then actually, in the negotiating, Stotts can't be bothered to try and push him up from 2 to towards 5. So he only ends up with 2 rather than 2.5. So he's swaggering around, but he's not actually getting the best out of that particular deal.
No, nice. But then, what I like about that is that he's also just had the scene with Krelper, in the quarry, where he's sorted him out in no uncertain terms who's boss in that situation.
Yes, yes.
Then looks like he's lost to Jack in the negotiation immediately after, saves his position by saying, well, actually, I'm a step closer finding out where Spectrox is, which is quite clever. And then it's revealed that he's in cahoots with Morgus. He is almost the connecting link between all those parties for a while. And like I say, he almost gets away with it.
Mm-hmm.
But fundamentally, for all his ruthlessness and brutality, is a fun watch.
I suppose even Crow Timmin isn't exactly an angel, is she? I mean, we cheer her on because she's done well for herself and been clever enough to not die like all these silly men. But she's been ruthless.
Yeah.
And she's now the head of this this awful conglomerate.
Yeah.
There's no sign that she's going to reform it and make its business practices any more ethical. She's going to take it what she can get. So
she's a great twist character.
It's another added pinch of cynicism rather than heartwarming.
Yeah, but she doesn't just survive; she thrives. Gosh, she rocks the fate of everybody else in a very appealing way. She's the closest to a round of applause. Well played. In her terms, she hasn't got her hands dirty. Just bided her time, took her opportunity, ruthless. Brilliant. Well,
the fun little exchange between her and Morgus is one of my favourite bits of dialogue ever. I don't like your tone. I wish that was all I didn't like about you. I find a place to use that almost. Not quite a daily basis, but I'm working towards it.
Yes. The world will forever be in your debt as well. A line from her.
There's lots of great dialogue, though, isn't there?
Yeah.
In this is again, is it the script or is it the direction? Some really brilliant pieces. One only has to look at them to realise the extent of their depravity. Was one of my favourite lines, and even the description that Jack makes that he was comely at one point in his life, which is just such an extraordinary word to use.
Yeah. So, nod to his roots in a sort of romantic fiction, isn't it? Rather than this world, a different world he lived in.
Yeah, and the line, more a tennis player than a cricketer.
Oh yes,
yes,
which I really liked.
I hadn't appreciated until I saw the production notes that someone said it's a John McEnroe joke.
Yes,
given the time period.
Yeah.
Although Jack is, superficially the Phantom of the Opera, he's not a shrieking, ranting madman like what am I trying to say? Magnus Greel. He's what you were just saying about him is reminiscing about days when he was comely. Reminds me of Lee Sen Chang, who I it's just hinted at his past than what he's given up, which is something I tried to explore a bit more when I wrote the prequel to Talons for Big Finish. I found him quite a fascinating character when you peel away all that.
Perhaps you should write a prequel to this.
Well, yes, please. But I mean, it's that felt pretentious enough doing that one.
It's a pretty good story to be told. Morgus and Jack.
Anyone ever has.
Yeah. You can have that one.
So yes, it's all. I mean, we could just list all the places where Robert Holmes is plagiarising himself and prove that it's all been done before, or all been done before, but is now here being polished and taken to a higher level. I mean, the Morgus stuff, conglomerate stuff, a corporate satire is very Sunmakers, isn't it? It reminds me of the Collector. What was that his name? I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm sure there must be more examples than that.
Yeah.
And the Holmes who.
And I guess the duplicates you've got in Spearhead from Space.
Well, we should probably talk about that a bit more because that is why we're here. No, it's not. It's not why we're here, but it's why we have the pairing we do. It doesn't do all that much duplicates, but it's not gratuitous. It's not like I'm always saying this, aren't I? That I feel you can tell when somebody has taken, different plot elements from different bags, and put them together like on a randomizer. I'll have a bit of this and a bit of that. I mean, it's not like the doppelganger thing came up on the fruit machine and we try to work out how to cram it in. It's used enough, but not so much that you think, well, that shouldn't have been here if you were going to underuse it. There needed to be more to justify it. It's having the plot point. I mean, what use do we get out of it? The plot point at the end of episode 1 and Salatine.
Yeah,
And Salatine.
It's arguable. It's exactly the right amount of duplicates.
Even there.
Go on.
Even there's no major big twist moment when we discover the duplicate Salatine, or when any other character discovers duplicate Salatine, or where it's revealed any specific information that the duplicate passes back to Jack. That causes the plot to go in a specific direction. It's more the slow revelation that he, even when Shellac finds out, he says, no wonder I've not got anywhere for months and months and months. It's not like a big aha moment. And again, that doesn't, in another story, that it could have felt like that would have been a definite negative. You'd have thought, well, you missed a trick there. Why did you bother putting it in? But here, no, it doesn't need that. It's not that sort of story, is it?
I wonder whether because I think the idea of the fake out death at the end of the cliffhanger that Richard never saw resolved came pretty early, I think, in the writing process. So I think it was something that Holmes was on record as saying it was an idea that occurred to him that was something you could do and have fun with because it was a regeneration story. So I wonder whether that was the motivation, whether saying, okay, let's do that, and then, okay, how do we get out of, how do I, if it's going to be a fake out, how do I resolve it? So I wonder whether that was the
why not
original motivation for it, and then he put Salatine in, because really with Salatine, it's only the plot mechanic. As you say, it's revealed in quite an offhand way when they meet Salatine, the real Salatine. He's just kind of there, isn't he?
He's used brilliantly. He's such a. I love the way they kill off the real Salatine so brutally,
Yes.
and
absolutely,
that doesn't happen very often in Who, and that genuinely is quite shocking.
Yeah, with
the robot gets a lovely moment at the end.
Yeah.
Yes, he does. The thing I really like about the Salatine double is traditionally in Doctor Who and such the other shows, when they discover the real Salatine, you're expecting, because TV has taught you this, that this is going to be a character sympathetic to being found, keen to be on the side of the Doctor, and he isn't. That scene where he laughs when he realises that the Doctor and Perry are ill is brilliant, because that turns potentially a slightly two-dimensional character who you know is going to behave in a certain way and throws you with that reaction. And then the great thing about that is you're not quite sure how he's going to play in terms of his relationship with the Doctor and Perry. So even with that, where you think it's going to go down a very traditional route, the story throws you. Really well done. And really well acted between the two versions of Salatine.
That particular moment, though, with Salatine, laughingly enumerates the symptoms of spectral toxemia. Sadly, I couldn't help also thinking of Blackadder with that. Cramp is the second stage. First a rash, then spasms, finally slow paralysis of the thoracic spinal nerve, and then TDP. And then you die? No, first you jump in a corner. Then you die.
Yeah.
I know, Robert Glenister plays a blinder.
Yeah.
Philip Glenister does even better, though. Sorry. Let me re-record that. I haven't got Graham Harper and Graham Williams mixed up yet. That's saying something for me, since that's one of my trademark. Philip Glenister plays a blinder. Yeah.
It is Robert.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bugger.
So now you've got to leave that.
Oh well,
in.
now you've got.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah.
because he was with Davison in that comedy thing in the early 80s. He was, I mean, certainly at least to me was well known at the time. So he was perhaps the only one that I in the cast that I already knew.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting when we get to Sarah Lancaster's performance as Buzzer in The Almost People. Any thoughts on when violence is too much violence? Because, my goodness me, there's a litany of violence in this. Gunplay, knife play, slow death, cyanide tablets, disfigurement, somebody getting pushed down a lift, Doctor having his arm pulled out by 2 androids, salary abuse. It's just...
somebody being boiled alive in a mudburst.
Yeah.
Although you can't quite see what's happening.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying... that sounds bloodthirsty. I didn't want to see Michael Cochrane's brother's skin peeling off in slow motion, if that's how it came across.
Not to mention death by armadillo.
I don't want to get...
It's not your lucky day either, says Doctor Who, sadly.
I don't want to get too Mary Whitehouse, but is that crossing the line? Where do we stand on?
Well, I mean, it's a bit Vengeance on Varos in a way, but whereas Vengeance in Varos to me always feels like, I mean, they're trying to make a point of it. I don't know. It feels natural. I mean, it's not that I want to have violence, and I feel like, for me, Resurrection of the Daleks oversteps the line and possibly has less killing. But this, I don't know. It doesn't feel like anyone's acting out of character, so it's not as big a thing for me.
You can't really call it gratuitous if it's all necessary to tell the story you're telling in the world you're telling it. Whereas maybe Resurrection feels like it crowbars. It does become slightly silly, doesn't it? It goes, this is opera. Well, no, it's not operatic, but not sure what Resurrection's aiming for, but it goes beyond operatic into just people randomly shooting each other just for effects, and also doing the disco dance of death, which luckily we avoid here. I mean, there's no laser guns. Thank God there's no laser guns. Was this the first... How many examples are there of a director saying, well, I just thought I'd go for real guns rather than lasers because I thought they'd look better? Is this the first time anyone says that explicitly? It just seems there's an obvious...
Well, it feels like it's exactly the same guns that they use in Colony in Space, and it's the same effect you get on the camera as well.
Yeah, but they're all single shot, aren't they? These are all automatic.
Right.
Hark at me trying to sound like I know anything about guns. It's much more visceral. They're all going rat-a-tat-a-tat, whereas there's a lot of cowboys and Indians pop, pop, pop in Colony.
Right.
Which is why they are not very exciting fights. But these ones are. But I mean, it gives it pace, and I mean, I don't know what it is. There's no reason why you can't make a laser gun have the same visceral impact as a whatever you call it, machine gun.
Projectile weapon.
But it takes more work to make a laser beam move that fast. It's got to move like a bullet, of course. And in the world of Doctor Who, they tend to draw them on just tootling across the screen.
You either do that or you have a spot that lights up on the person's chest without any intervening.
That's only in Warriors of the Deep the way they do that, isn't it? I can't bear it.
Invisible Enemy, I think, has something similar, unless I'm imagining that.
Yes, I remember. Yeah, that it was a sort of star-shaped.
Not K9, but some of the others. Yeah, but yeah, as you say, Star Wars obviously gets away with on a massive budget, and they cheat. They cheat by making most of the weapons. They fire short pulses of laserness.
Yes, or they're probably supposed to be plasma or something, aren't they? That's how they normally get away with it, by making them an excuse to be more physical.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, the point is, if you can't do... it seems to be the choice that these directors have to make, really. If you can't... They know that you can't really do laser beams very well on this budget and this time scale, so the choice is to replace them with real guns or take the lasers out, which some directors have done, but that doesn't seem to speed things up. Anyway, I don't want to... I'm sounding quite violent now.
Yeah. See what this story's done to you, Paul.
It has.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm going to plagiarise John Elledge. I got a link to his blog off the Blue Sky, I think it was, and so I thought, I'll just see what he had to say about Caves of Androzani. And what he highlighted was that episode 3 of Caves ends in the same way as episode 3 of Underwater Menace. Nothing in the world can stop me now. And this one, I'm not going to let you stop me now. And yet, somehow the energy is different. The one sort of makes you sort of laugh a little bit, whereas Davison in this, you kind of believe it.
I really like that ending to the episode. It's got this beautiful pink hue to it.
Yeah.
Peter Davison is given some space in a room on his own, and he's interesting and eye-catching when he's burning the cuffs off, when he's beginning to panic around, well, I'm going to have to crash the ship. He knows that the door is being breached. He does that a magnificent airplane safety announcement type line at one point about, you better strap yourself in. I'm going to crash this. And he has the wonderful line on top of, I'm not going to let you stop me now, around, that's not a very persuasive argument. Stops. And what a great cliffhanger. I'm just going to crash the ship.
Oh, yeah.
So just that passage. And, sometimes I don't get on with the Fifth Doctor and the way he's portrayed, but I feel like he got moments to shine in this, and that few minutes was absolutely it. He shone.
Yeah, it feels like in this, and then also anything written by Christopher Bidmead, that he kind of, they understand the character of the Fifth Doctor, and not many other places do.
No, there are several writers who make him more interesting, who rise above writing blankly because they can't, because he's not got a massive eccentricities on the surface like some of the other. But they don't all do it in the same way, all the people that do the Fifth Doctor well, which I find interesting. But anyway, I was going to say, do we think he's at his most sarcastic here, or sassy, as the Americans would have it? The reactor I watched the other week seemed to think so. I think Holmes is on record as saying that he just wrote for the Fourth Doctor because he didn't know what the Fifth Doctor's character was. That's clearly not true. Sort of thing writers say, self-deprecating writers say. But to that extent, he may be more humorous here because that's what Holmes is used to. And what might come across as, humour is the thing that can vary most between actors. So if some of this sarcasm did have a Tom Baker voice in Holmes's head, then Davison gives it a very different slant, doesn't he? I was told once by a script editor that the Fifth Doctor is not sarcastic. It wasn't true in the 80s, and it wasn't true when the script editor told me that.
I mean, Davison is, from the stuff we've seen from him, like the Five-ish Doctors, the videos he made for Gallifrey Convention. I mean, they all show that side of him. So if it's not coming through in the rest of his stories, it's because the writers or the directors have missed it, I think, rather than because it's out of character here.
Well, he is one of our great comic actors, really, and I think it's a failing, if they don't take advantage of that aspect of his talents. I think that being said, I can see certain things like I can see Tom and Lalla having fun with that Sir, that Shellac interrogation scene could have played out pretty similarly.
And that's probably the biggest change in Peri's character, because she barely knows the Doctor, but they get a little rhythm going on there. In a place which she never really has with the Sixth Doctor.
No.
Deliberately, admittedly, but it's. I think I just prefer it. How could I not prefer this?
The other difference for the Fifth Doctor in this is he's got a very different type of companion. All the others never really were in it for the joy of adventuring. Any of it, most of them were in some way working against the Doctor, either by just criticising him on every turn or actively trying to kill him in the case of Turlough. For Peri, that opening scene when on the planet where Fifth Doctor's being all very investigative about the tracks and everything and what this planet's about. Perry's full of wonder. She's glad to be there. She's glad to be in the company of the Doctor, and I think that gives a bit of a clue as to why the Fifth Doctor can be as likable and have a bit of wit about him. He's not facing into some companions who fundamentally don't want to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got rid of the sulky teenagers at last. Yeah.
Totally. And I think that comes across in some of the big finishes as well that Perry is in with him.
Well, I think that's one of the beneficial, as you say, the fact they do seem to have this relationship. That is a gap that's waiting to be. That's logically, it makes sense that they have. And okay, you've got to do some continuity engineering to work out why she's wearing the same outfit she was wearing in Planet of Fire, but
And
otherwise
she says makes a change from lava.
Yes, that too. But otherwise, it does make sense that they've been traveling together for some time and know each other fairly well. And it
in
is
fairness, sometimes I wear my clothes twice.
true.
And maybe they've just come back from the web planet, with for the lava line. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Yes,
Very good. Have you just thought of that?
Hey. Excellent.
Yeah.
This thing about Saward apparently being unaware of the merits or unable to distinguish the merits of this compared to Twin Dilemma, and you do wonder, and does that maybe tie into the fact that, because I think that some of the excesses of this, the problem is this story carries a problematic legacy. It feels into the last two stories both carry this legacy into season 22 of that it does feel like the fact that you have this Phantom of the Opera scene is just taken as an excuse to then have a series of stories that reduce Perry to the object of lechery for
God, yes.
and the ultra violence gets dialed further up. And obviously season 21 was already going that way, and to my mind, Warriors of the Deep isn't as gratuitous as Resurrection. It feels like in Warriors of the Deep it's all there with a point, and it's ages since I've seen it, but it feels like, given the story Warriors of the Deep is setting out to tell, and that it is a parable, and it's the whole thing's a parable on mutually assured destruction. So it makes sense that in that case that everyone does end up dead, and that's sort of central to things. But once it does feel like the adulation that this received, it took all the wrong messages from. Maybe there's a parallel universe where they said, okay, that proves that everyone wants really tightly crafted character pieces, and we really need to up our character work for season 22, and cast really good actors in every part. And let's get better directors and.
So the whole regeneration then, which I mean I've heard it said before, but I noticed for the first time this time through that you get the same effect at the end of episode 3 as you get at the end of episode 4, very briefly.
I never see that. I've still.
Oh, really? Okay.
I've read. Yeah, everyone says it every time I watch it. I then read that afterwards and think, "Yep, one day maybe."
I saw that the first time. It stuck.
Yeah,
with
of course you bloody did. That's why you're the astrophysics writer. Just some pleb.
You see, I thought the regeneration graphics. I thought, wow, this is a glimpse of the new title sequences. This is going to be what the new title sequence is going to be like.
Oh, that would have been.
Which would have, and then it turned out to. I was very, very sadly disappointed. The following week.
Yeah, I mean, for the time, I guess the whole sequence, it's the most dramatic, I guess, that any of the regenerations have got to this point. I mean, obviously now it's nothing compared with any of the ones they've done in the new series. And I think I watched it this time and barely noticed it. But yes, at the time it was quite a thing with all the revolving heads and the graphics and so on.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just building on Legopolis, isn't it, really? They've established a precedent of having flashbacks.
Yeah.
We're in the flashback era, so I suppose that would have been the obvious thing to do, just repeat Legopolis. But I'm very glad that they went a step further. I'm a sucker
Yeah,
for
I
that
think-
sort of thing. There's
I think once you establish it feels different this time,
Hmm.
you're obliged to make it feel different.
Yes, yeah, true.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, so that little bit in episode 3 was apparently Graham Harper's idea, I believe, not Bob
Yeah, I was-
Holmes.
assuming that.
And to him, we owe the much milked new series concept that you can put off regeneration for. And in Androzani, the Doctor puts off regeneration because he's damn well going to say Perry,
Yes.
and with the best one in the world. And
Has Russ Lever quoted that as his precedent for the way?
I don't know, but
It's,
yeah, and,
it's a shame he didn't just go mooning around visiting old companions and getting wet in the street, really, isn't it?
well,
But,
it's, exactly, yes.
No
it's
doubt
far-
in Big
far better
Finish
use
he
of all
does.
that time.
There's something clever Big Finish do. I think there's one story which
Right.
is set in the
oh, yes.
in the moments when he's regenerated. But I can't remember now what
really?
the hell, whether it's
Okay.
from the Doctor's perspective or one of the companions he's thinking
Yeah.
of. I just can't remember now.
I also half remember that, but not well enough to tell you.
Adric?
So, I was going to ask,
Mhm.
is this the number one Doctor Who story of all time?
It's hard to say, isn't it?
Now, for me, I'll try and keep this brief. For me, the problem is that most of the time when you're asked to pick the best example of something, it's atypical. And that's why it stands out so
Yeah.
much. That's true of most series. I mean, Buffy fans all like that musical one, don't they? And it's not that doing something different automatically means it's going to be better. The musical one could have been dog shit. But the point is that if it works, then it's going to stand above. So, do you then you're then asking yourself, is this the best? Should I strike out all the atypical episodes and just confine myself to voting for the best one that's like all the others, the best example of what this thing usually is? Like, do you strike out? You can't have the 5 Doctors. That's a special. You can't have whatever.
It's why it was a bad idea for you to show the future Mrs. Morris this
Yeah.
early in the run. You'd have been far better off showing her some run-of-the-mill stuff. And then,
Yeah. Well, if from my next
How's
one,
she married
I'll
you?
do
I
it.
don't know.
But
Exactly, yeah. Seems to have worked out all right.
Yeah, start with the Web Planet.
so, having said that, but then we did each have to decide for ourselves whether we think this is a typical Doctor Who story, whether it has. I mean, I was briefly chatting to a former Something Who contributor beforehand, before we came on, and this person said that they weren't a great fan, and they thought it was a great bit of drama but bad Doctor Who, and I can imagine plenty of stories you could say that about.
Yeah.
I didn't ask further because I didn't want to poison my mind because I'd already knew what I was going to say. But so I can see that point of view. But if I was going for me, it's always between Talons and this. And if I was choosing the best example of a more typical story, I suppose I'll go for Talons. And because it feels unfair to say that this is the best, even though it is, because not every story can do this. You don't want this every week. But so it depends whether you want to take that into account.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was long-winded. The rest of you just can go, yes, yes, no.
If you asked me in 1984, I would have said yes. If you ask me now, I feel like this and Power of the Daleks probably come to mind, and it's hard to assess Power without actually being able to see it. But actually, it's quite similar, isn't it? Everyone ends up dead in that too, and it's all very quite tightly plotted and so on. So I guess that's maybe just shows you the sort of Doctor Who that I like.
Is it literally everybody in Power?
No, well, no, it's not quite everybody,
No.
but it's damn near to it.
Okay.
Giles?
Oh God, you are going to put me on the spot about this.
Yes, I am. Yes, that's what
Yes,
I'm here for.
answer yes or no. Yes. Is this out of the when this is classic and new? The poll. This is all Doctor Who.
I think it was the last time they did an all poll. Yeah.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, Didn't really think about that, but if when you bring the new series in, the exact same thing applies. Everyone says Blink. How can it be Blink? Because it's not the Doctor's not in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you know, in
It's
my
cheating.
as well as stalling, you know, that also I was going to use that in order to say no gridlock, but then again, gridlock is absolutely atypical and not really. And okay, in some ways, it maybe conforms somewhat more to the template of Doctor Who, but it's a damn weird story. I wouldn't say you can quite mine its depths without having. Yeah, I don't know.
Fair enough. Is that a yes or no then, Giles?
It's probably a no, and I did wonder slightly cynically whether some of the adoration that it gets is due to is sort of a youthful memory of traumatized fanboys who were used to being laughed at for being Doctor Who fans in the playground, and finally this was a grown up Doctor Who where everyone had machine guns and lots of people were being. Yeah, it's one of the, you know, Armadillo aside, it's one of the least, you know, it's one of the least embarrassing ones to shows people who would be usually mockers of Doctor Who.
Although, as we've heard, still not good enough.
Yes, true.
I guess so, but that wouldn't have been what I was.
No, that wouldn't have been
personally. But I guess I didn't need to say that.
Yeah. So Rick.
Not all fans.
Yes or
Rick,
no?
Rick, yes. Yeah,
It's a no. But,
okay.
But it is growing on me. Still.
Yeah. I think I agree with you that I mean, certainly it was topping polls in the late 80s, I think, and that was very much, I think, based on what people have just been saying. But I feel like my enthusiasm for it now was based on other things.
It's funny because thinking about, sorry, I'm dragging this out, but just thinking about it, as I suddenly the alternative question popped into my head, which was, is this the best Fifth Doctor story? To which my immediate answer is, no, that's Frontios. And yeah, instantly, like that's an easy question. Like, so I think, well, okay, if this isn't the best Fifth Doctor story, how can this be the best Doctor Who story?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess my answer would be Frontios is the best story for the Fifth Doctor, but I feel like this is, for me, I prefer watching this story just because there are some aspects of Frontios I find frustrating. But yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely love the character of the Fifth Doctor in Frontios.
Yeah.
Have we got anything else that we want to say about this story before we put it to bed?
Should I spring my? I'm gonna spring my obscure connection.
Okay, go on.
Because otherwise, by the time we get to the end of the next part, I'd have forgotten it already. Yeah. According to the subtitles, production notes, this had some cut dialogue at the start, which I'm not sure whether it ended up on the cutting room floor or whether they weren't able to record it on location, and so they ADR'd the Doctor and Perry's dialogue, you know, on the surface.
Right.
But there's a whole thing about the fact that the Doctor had learned how to blow glass in a Thuringian monastery, and apparently this was Robert Holmes's nod to name of the, little in joke about the name of the rose kind of thing. And yes, we're just about to come onto a story onto which the idea of things being set in a monastery was grafted, I believe, by Matthew Graham.
Very good.
Stunned into silence by the obscurity of that connection, Giles. I raise a glass.
Yeah.
Of the excellence of your research.
I can confirm that it didn't occur to Microsoft Copilot.
No. Bloody hell.
Yes.
Useless AI.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, in which case, I think we've come, eventually to the end of our discussions on this one. We'll be back in a bit with our talk about Rebel Flesh, Almost People. So, yeah, look out for that. See you soon.
Groovy.
Bye.
Indeed. Blimey, you've done a proper outro to part 1.
Oh, I mean,
Complete with the sign off and everything.
old dogs, new tricks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Only took 111 episodes.